Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tech Tuesday. I'm glad to see we've got a good turnout tonight. Thanks for taking time out to join us. It's really good to see everybody, especially on this chilly evening. Looks like some people are a little bit more chilly than others. Right, so I asked for suggestions last week, and the suggestion that came up was, what about the interaction between food and medication? And I must admit, it was something that I hadn't really thought about much. I've heard about it and I've read a few things here and there, but I hadn't really thought about it too much. And then I started doing research and I discovered it's actually quite scary. So bottom line is, it's always a good idea to check with your pharmacist, not your doctor, with no disrespect to the doctors out there, but doctors are not taught that much about medication, just like doctors are not taught that much about nutrition. And they will tell you, oh, you need this medication and that medication, and they get to prescribe the meds, but they don't always think about or understand the interaction between the medications. And remember that pretty much all drugs have got side effects. And what works for you might not work for me, and the other way around. And then you start getting your combination of drugs. If you just prescribe a single drug, that's not too much of a problem. But you then have, if you listen to patients talking, they will tell you they've got a medication for their heart, and they've got a medication for their blood pressure, and they've got a medication for the cholesterol, and they've got a medication for the mind, and they've got a medication for their back, and they've got the list just grows and grows and grows. And sometimes it's almost like listening to them describe a box of Smarties, because I've got a green one and a blue one and a brown one and a pink and yellow one, and it can get very, 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 very confusing after a while. And when we haven't even gotten to the names of these things. So during my research and during my preparation for this, I did edit out quite a few of the names that I'm not even going to attempt to try and pronounce, because they're just not on. But bottom line is, in my opinion, and it really is my personal opinion, one should not be on medication for an extended period of time. When your body is showing a sign that it's needing a problem, so you've got a problem with blood pressure, that's not an indication that you're needing a tablet or that you're short of a tablet. It's an indication that you're short of a nutrient. If you have a cholesterol issue, it's generally not an indication that you're missing a statin. It's an indication that you're missing a nutrient. And as we've seen in the past with the book written by Dr. Jim McAfee called Your Body's Sign Language, all of these things are signs and symptoms of an underlying issue, whether it's you're missing a nutrient, whether you've got too much of something, whether there's an interaction that's causing a problem. There is a problem. It's not a medication problem. That is my personal opinion, and I will not hold that against anybody else. So let me share my screen and get into my presentation. Get all these goodies up and going over here. And there's this. Okay, so the title is Food and Drug Interactions, What to be Aware of When Taking Medications or Going for Surgery. You know, it can sometimes be almost like a flippant thing. Oh, you've got this and this problem, we need to operate. Just those words alone are quite scary for me. We need to operate, because surgery comes with its own risks. So the doctors have to weigh up what the risk of the surgery is against non-surgical intervention. So if you've been involved in a bad accident and your bone is sticking through the skin, they need to do surgery. I'm not going to argue about that one at all, because that's an emergency thing. If you've got a burst appendix, you need surgery. That's a non-negotiable, and it better happen sooner rather than later. However, there are some things that you can put off and maybe even try and reduce the risk of surgery. But if you do need to end up having surgery, there's certain precautions that you need to take. And if you are fortunate enough to have a good couple of weeks notification that you are going to have surgery, like for instance, you're going to be having a knee replacement or a hip replacement or spinal surgery, sometimes people know at least about a month in advance before that happens, and you can take precautions. But we'll start off with the basics. And the original article, if you want the copy of this, I'm more than happy to send you the link. It's quite a, I call it a higher grade because it was even higher grade for me, article. So I found it very, very interesting as I was going through this research. Medicines can treat and cure many health problems, as we know. However, they must be taken properly to ensure that they are safe and effective. Just like with nutrition, as we know, we can take a whole handful of things on a daily basis. But if your body is not absorbing it and processing it correctly, what is the point? And exactly the same goes with medication. You can take a whole pharmacy load of medication, but if your body is not absorbing it and processing it correctly, what's the point? Medications should be extremely specific in their effects, have the same predictable effect for all patients, never be affected by concomitant food or other medications, exhibit linear potency, meaning it goes directly to the problem, be totally non-toxic in any dosage, and require only a single dose to effect a permanent cure. Now, toxicologists will tell you that the poison is in the dose. So medication technically is poison. Too much of a certain thing can have detrimental effects. Too little, it's pretty pointless, but you therefore have to have the correct dosage. So looking at the above point, this ideal drug is still to be discovered. Have you ever had anybody say to you, why do I need to take a multivitamin and a CalMag and a magnesium and a vitamin C and can't I just take everything in one tablet? And the answer is the same as this. This ideal supplement or medication is yet to be discovered. Because if you did have to put everything in one package, it would probably be too big for you to swallow. Many medicines have powerful ingredients that interact with the human body in different ways. Diet and lifestyle can sometimes have a significant impact on drugs. A drug interaction is a situation in which a substance affects the activity of a drug. In other words, the effects are increased or decreased, or they produce a new effect that neither produces on its own. It's just like you can have hydrogen and you can have oxygen. It's two chemicals that on their own do nothing. But you take 2 parts of hydrogen and you mix it with 1 part of oxygen, and what do you get? You get water. Water wasn't there before, because oxygen on its own isn't water and hydrogen on its own isn't water. But if you take the correct dosage of 2 parts of hydrogen to 1 part of water and you put the two together, or oxygen, you will have water. And medication does a similar thing. If you have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, on their own, they each do their own thing. But when they combine, what happens? Exactly how a nuclear bomb works. You can have an atom floating around, does nothing. But you split the atom and what happens? A very bright flash and a very loud noise, and then you don't hear anything again. Typically, interactions between drugs come to mind, such as a drug-drug interaction. However, interactions may also exist between drugs and foods. So you have a drug-food interaction, as well as drugs and herbs, which is a drug-herb interaction. Remember, herbs, let me rephrase that. Most medication stems originally from herbal use. Now, herbs, as we know, work really well to flavor our food. But if mixed and used correctly in different ways, herbs make pretty potent medications as well. And way back in the Dark Ages, before pharmacists were invented, you had herbalists. And if you go into the Chinese history, you will find herb masters going back many centuries. So these interactions may occur out of an accidental misuse or due to lack of knowledge about the active ingredients involved in the relative substances. Remember, read the labels. Even on our supplements, you have your active ingredient and you have your trace elements. Just like in nature, you have your main ingredient and you have your trace elements. And this is how our supplements came about. Remember, based in nature. So they take that substance as it's found in nature together with all of its trace elements. And if you don't have the trace, your effect is not going to be quite the same. Same with medication. Interactions between food and drugs may inadvertently reduce or increase the drug effect. Some commonly used herbs, fruits, as well as alcohol may cause failure of the therapy up to a point of serious alterations of the patient's health. For instance, we know that omega-3 has got a thinning type effect on the blood. It doesn't thin the blood as such, but it makes the platelets less sticky, which enables the blood to flow more easily. And if you've been taking omega-3 for some time, you cut yourself, you will know that your blood comes out slightly differently. It's not as thick, and it takes a little bit longer for it to clot. Now, if you have your omega-3s, and we're talking quite a few, like 3 or 4, together with a warfarin dose, you could be in serious trouble because warfarin works like pain thinners, and it physically thins the blood. Omega-3 makes your platelets less sticky, so it doesn't thin the blood, but it makes it flow more easily. That combined with warfarin can cause an internal bleed and, technically speaking, can cause your death. So be careful. The majority of clinically relevant food-drug interactions are caused by food-induced changes in the bioavailability of the drug. Remember, bioavailability, that's a big word, means the amount that your body can actually absorb. So if something is not if something has a very low bioavailability, it means it's not easily absorbed, like a non-chelated calcium, for instance. It's got a very low bioavailability. Your chelated calcium has got quite a high bioavailability, which means it's a lot more easily absorbed. Major side effects of some diet or food on drugs include an alteration in absorption by fatty, high protein, and fiber diets. The most important interactions are those associated with a high risk of treatment failure arising from a significantly reduced bioavailability in the fed state, in other words, with food. Such interactions are frequently caused by chelation. We all know what chelation is. It's a type of bonding of ions and molecules to metal ions with components in food. In addition, the physiological response to food intake, in particular gastric acid secretion, may reduce or increase the bioavailability of certain drugs. So if you've got a lot of acid in your stomach, it could cause one problem. If you don't have sufficient acid in your stomach, it could cause another problem. The interaction of natural products and drugs is a common hidden problem encountered in clinical practice. As I said, doctors are expected to know a huge amount of information. They spend at least 7 years going through very large volumes of medical books, not to mention countless lectures with words as big as a dictionary. And they've got to retain all of that. And when you sit down in front of your doctor, you expect him to know everything that he learned in the 7 years that was maybe 20 years ago. You expect your doctor to know everything about the medication that he's prescribing you. You expect him to know how that medication is going to react with you specifically, with your food specifically, and your lifestyle specifically. It's not humanly possible for anybody to do that. But I know I'm guilty of it as well. We expect the doctor to know these things. And common story of, but why didn't my doctor tell me? Probably because your doctor didn't know. The interactions between natural products and drugs are based on the same pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic principles as drug-drug interactions. So they work pretty much the same way. Remember, as it's always been said, diet is what you eat, nutrition is what you absorb. And exactly the same thing works with medication. You can take the medication, but it's how it's absorbed, when, where it's absorbed, is what makes it effective. Several fruits and berries have recently been shown to contain agents that affect drug metabolizing enzymes. Remember, we all have enzymes in our gut and in our intestine that are there to basically digest the food and the medication. Drugs can show their efficacy only if administered in appropriate quantity with appropriate combination of drugs and foods and at the appropriate time. For instance, painkiller. You don't take an oral painkiller when you feel your greatest pain, because by the time it starts to be metabolized and broken down, your pain level is already starting to drop naturally. If you take it in time, by the time your pain level starts to peak, the pain medication is kicked in and it takes the edge off and it's not a problem. That's why sometimes people say, oh, but I took those tablets and they didn't work. This is exactly why. So you take a pain medication, for instance, if you've had a knee replacement or a hip replacement and you're going for physiotherapy, you take your pain meds a good half an hour to 45 minutes before your appointment, so that by the time you know that the pain's going to kick in, so is the pain medication, and now suddenly they work. But you'll find again, and I will always talk from an orthopedic perspective because that's what I interact with on a regular basis. They will often for orthopedic pain prescribe things like Tramoset or Tramadol and Panado. If you just take Panado on its own, it's not going to be as effective. If you just take Tramadol or Tramoset on its own, it's not going to be as effective. But you mix the two at the correct dose, at the correct time, you will be pretty much pain-free. It is a difficult and complex problem to accurately determine the effects of food and nutrients on a particular drug. This is why they call it a medical practice. So certain things like juices. Among all fruit juices, grapefruit juice, or GFJ, possesses high interaction with almost all types of drugs. Did you know that? I didn't. The juice modifies the body's way of metabolizing the medication, affecting the liver's ability to work the drug through a person's system. GFJ is generally contraindicated to patients taking psychotropic or psychotropics, in other words, for antidepressants, etc. And it is advised to inform patients about the described interaction. With new anticonvulsants, serum iron and sodium need to be monitored. Okay, let me put that up differently. With new anticonvulsants, serum iron and sodium need to be monitored because they can cause a problem. Anticonvulsants are what they prescribe for epilepsy. Additionally, users are advised to avoid drinking grapefruit juice within 1 to 2 hours of taking these anticonvulsants. Cholesterol-lowering agent lovastatin should be taken with food to enhance the gastrointestinal absorption and bioavailability. And this is why when you receive your medication from the pharmacist, they should tell you very clearly, this needs to be taken with food, before food, or after food, because that will tell you how the interaction works. The absorption of rosuvastatin, another antihyperlipidemic or anti-cholesterol agent, was significantly decreased in the fed state compared with the fasting state, which suggests that this statin should be administered on an empty stomach. Simvastatin, etc., may be taken without regards to food. So in other words, it's not affected. So there we've got 3 different types of cholesterol-lowering medication, each needing to be taken differently. And after that simvastatin, I edited out half a dozen other things that they're all statins, but they don't need to be, you don't worry about how and when you take them. However, a high fiber diet may lower the efficacy of these drugs. Because what does fiber do? It absorbs fats and oils. Warfarin is a common one. As my father always used to call it, rat poison. And he was put on warfarin after he'd had a heart bypass and valve replacement. And that had to be carefully regulated. You'll see this little graphic over here with the foods that are high in vitamin K. I'll explain that in a minute. Patients taking warfarin are at particular risk of interactions with dietary supplements, yet approximately 30% use herbal or natural product supplements on a regular basis. There is a possible interaction between warfarin and a high-protein diet. Some vegetables, such as broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, parsley, spinach, and others, as you can see over here, are very high in vitamin K. Vitamin K is what is administered to assist with clotting. So if somebody is bleeding or they've overdosed on warfarin for whatever reason, or as has been seen with children, they've ingested rat poison, they are given vitamin K in an injectable solution to enable clotting to kick in again. Eating large quantities or making sudden changes in the amounts eaten of these vegetables interferes with the effectiveness and safety of warfarin therapy. So in other words, if you regularly eat a fairly healthy serving of broccoli, Brussels sprouts, spinach, etc., and you are now put on warfarin, don't change that, because when they're testing your blood, they will see what the interaction is at that stage. If you've never eaten these things, you get put on warfarin and now suddenly you become a vegetarian and you live on spinach and Brussels sprouts and broccoli on a daily basis, it is going to affect how that warfarin works. And if you're a big fan of needles, well, you know, knock yourself out, because they need to test your blood virtually daily in the beginning to get the warfarin balance correct. If anything changes dramatically, you need to have your blood tested again. And the only way to test your blood is to suck it out of you. If you like needles, misbehave. Eating charbroiled food, whether it's rye or barbecued, may decrease the warfarin activity, while eating cooked onions may increase the warfarin activity. Little things like that. Soy foods have been reported both to increase and to decrease warfarin activity. The significance of these last three interactions remains unclear. So they know there are interactions. How or why? They haven't a clue. The combination of warfarin administration and cranberry juice ingestion appeared to be associated with an elevated INR or clotting time without bleeding in elderly patients. Antihypertensive drugs, or this is your blood pressure drugs, blood pressure medication. Patients placed on antihypertensive drugs will benefit from concomitant moderate sodium restricted diets. In other words, keep the salt out of your diet. Propranolol serum levels may be increased if taken with rich protein food. A change in diet from high carbohydrates, low protein, or high carb, low protein, to low carb and high protein may result in increased oral clearance, meaning how long it takes for the drugs to clear your system. Smoking may decrease its plasma levels by increasing its metabolism. Lifestyle choices. The intestinal absorption of celiprolol, I hope I got that correct, which is a beta blocker, is inhibited when it is taken with orange juice. Hesperidin present in orange juice is responsible for the decreased absorption of this drug. The absorption of ACE inhibitors is increased when taken on an empty stomach, while grapefruit juice increases the bioavailability of felodipine, which is a calcium 2 channel blocker. And I'm going to stop right there. We've still got about 7 minutes left, but I'd like to open up. If anybody's got any questions, I will attempt to answer, but please know I am not a pharmacist, I am not a doctor, and neither am I a dietitian. So if you've got questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself and fire away. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording and leave it at an open mic.
Hello.
Hi.
So nice to have you on, Amanda and Annette. How wonderful. Well done.
We've got a full house tonight.
Yeah, lovely.
Stop recording.